Hi everyone. Hi guys. It's been a while since I made a video and I've been busy, as most of you know, or many of you will know. Anyway, it occurred to me that I don't often talk about why I got into healing work. So I thought maybe it was time to do that. So I want to talk a bit about my history, and it started over 30 years ago. And I learned all about the power of the subconscious mind and how certain tools like hypnosis and neuro-linguistic programming, NLP for short, could help you to basically change bad habits, get rid of phobias, lose weight, stop smoking, and stuff like that. But much more important for me was how powerful these tools really could be in helping people to heal from, real deep trauma. Traumas like, being horribly abused as a child, and that includes sexually, physically, emotionally. And I'm talking about really awful things that should never, ever happen to anyone, certainly not to a child. But sadly, it happens all too often. And I am continuously hearing stories, almost daily. I'm in touch with people whose lives have been deeply impacted by these horrible traumas that happened to them when they were kids. And it's the kind of trauma that stays with them their entire lives, and it affects their sense of self, their self-worth, and a whole bunch more, and it leaves them emotionally scarred. Now, 7 years ago, I happened to work with two clients back to back who'd suffered both childhood trauma, which I'm trained in dealing with, and had experienced multiple forms of abuse. And they had subsequently gotten involved with narcissists. So that the cycle of abuse that they were used to continued, albeit in a slightly different form. And both of them were really and truly at their wits' end. And they had tried all kinds of healing, including working with therapists. And though they got some relief and made some progress, all the symptoms were still really there. Crippling anxiety, anger, lost sense of self, and all the other symptoms that go with C-PTSD and, the fallout of abuse. And suddenly the term narcissism just appeared on my radar from basically working with these two people, and it suddenly seemed to be everywhere. So I began my journey of research into all things NPD, which is narcissistic personality disorder, and how the abuse affected people. Now, I read 100+ books, I watched countless YouTube videos, I read thousands of articles, and I became really, really fascinated with the whole world of narcissistic abuse, so much so that I decided to specialize in helping people to heal from it. And basically, I'll explain why in a minute. Now, people who've had toxic, traumatic childhoods are very, very prone to getting into toxic relationships and marriages and friendships and all sorts when they become adults. And the reasons why are multifaceted. But in a nutshell, they've been conditioned to accept substandard treatment as normal. So when it shows up in a new relationship, they recognize it and it's familiar to them and they just accept it. And one of the other key things to remember here is that they also have not been taught to love themselves and to know that they are valuable and they matter. So that low self-worth is also there. So it's almost like, well, I'm not good enough. I don't deserve any better. This is familiar. And so they get into these relationships. And very often this happens at an unconscious level. So they just accept it because they don't know how not to. Now, if you've never learned that you're good enough, that you're worthy, that you deserve love and happiness, then you can spend your whole life feeling like you don't belong, like there's something wrong with you. And those beliefs, as I've just kind of mentioned, are very much subconscious programming. Now, all of that connects very much with my training. I also learned during this that the majority of my clients had suffered childhood trauma, and they also are empaths or HSPs. which is highly sensitive people. In case you're watching and you don't know, I do get asked often when I say HSP, what's that? So the trauma that they experience cuts even more deeply, because empaths, they want to help each other, they want to heal, they want to fix them, they want to be the caregivers. And when that backfires in the horrible way it does when you're dealing with a narcissist, it cuts really, really deep. And in doing what they do, they unwittingly leave themselves wide open to being abused by narcissists or toxic people. And they just don't know how to heal, how to stop hurting, how to stop it from happening again. And most importantly, how to really learn to set boundaries, protect their own energy, and protect themselves from absorbing all the energy that comes from people outside of them. And so to help them heal these deep wounds, I needed to employ a real variety of different healing modalities. And what absolutely amazed me when I started working with people to help them with narcissistic abuse recovery is that the healing techniques that I'd used to help people recover from deep trauma worked equally well for people dealing with narcissists and narcissistic abuse. Because at the end of the day, what it boils down to, in a nutshell, is that trauma is trauma. So no matter how it shows up as an end result, the root trauma is where the trouble lies, okay? Now, both the clients that I mentioned, they were able to heal these old inner wounds and start recovering their sense of self. And one of them even said to me, you know, it was like a lightning bolt when I found out that I'd been abused by a covert malignant narcissist, and my body and soul, which are really interesting words, I'll come back to these in a minute, my body and soul were in complete turmoil. It was one of the worst times of my life, and it left me convinced that a fundamental change in my life was needed. So she said that working with me opened that door for her, and that she could finally see this new direction that her journey needed to take her. And I won't go into it more. It's on my website if you want to read my testimonials. And I've had the same thing happen with guys that I work with. Now, I also dug into research about the brain and trauma, the nervous system and trauma, and the often missing element of spirituality, and how we need to heal on all levels: mind, brain, body, and spirit. So I've added these elements into my healing process. And this is vital because we're all made up of these different components. Therefore, we have to heal from every angle. My new super course that I'll tell you about another time, it's going to be coming soon. It means tackling your pain from every angle, and specifically looking at those different areas and connecting each area. So just going to dig into that a little bit for you. So we'll take a little snapshot of how that looks. So let's look at your mind. What we need to do when we work together is find out what's going on mentally for you. How do things show up for you? Are you seeing negative images or movies playing in your head, like constantly, can't stop them? Now, what I like to ask you is, what if you could change those images and get rid of them for good, so that you'd never have to watch the same movie again? Wouldn't that be cool? Now, that's entirely possible with one of my NLP techniques. Another part of that is, are you hearing negative self-talk, or the negative put-downs and abuse that you heard a million times from your abusers? You playing this over and over in your head. This is super common. I've talked to people today and yesterday that I'm working with who are having this very issue, okay? Now, you can also change that racket that's going on in your head with a few simple techniques that I can teach you that actually puts you back in control. So that's one part. Now you've got to think about your brain. So how is all this affecting your brain? And what can you do to start rewiring your brain? And does neuroplasticity really work? And can it work for your brain? Now, the answer is yes, it does, and it can, and it's been scientifically validated. And I can also teach you a lot about your brain and trauma, so that you understand trauma from a completely different perspective, but you also start looking at how I can rewire that. How can I retrain my brain to think differently, feel differently? And then, of course, we look at what's going on in your body. where is the trauma stored in your body? Because it's there, believe me. So when I work with clients, I always ask them to locate the actual trauma in their body. And you know what? They always can. It might be a little bit hazy, a little bit difficult at first, but I can always guide them to find it. So then we can work on specific techniques to actually release the trauma. And I do this in a way that is easy, painless, and it's actually even fun. Now, we can get your trauma responses that you might be having every day of the week from a scale of, 10 being absolutely awful, down to half that, down to 2, down to even 0. And you can do that in one session. And then when we check in, you try to get it back. You can't get that same memory or thought or whatever it was, or the feeling, can't get it back. It's gone. It's really, really cool way of letting go of trauma. And then we bring in the spirit, and you can call the spirit your higher power. You can call it source, whatever you think is your spiritual connection. And I don't mean religious. You may or may not be religious. If you are, that's fine. If you're not, that's fine. But there is a higher power, and you have a connection to that you may not realize, you have forgotten, you don't know how to tap into your higher power. Do you know how incredibly powerful it is when you can do that? This might be something you've never even thought of. But in my experience working with my clients, empaths particularly, they are very, very connected to that knowledge of inner power, but it gets lost under all the murky waters of everything else they're trying to process and deal with. So we are all spiritual beings, and empaths are pretty good when it comes to getting into that reconnection, because they just know it's there. It's this intuition that, sensitives and empaths have, but they kind of, as I say, they've lost that connection. So it's necessary to get reconnected. And that spiritual element that gets lost in the fog of everything, this is often the case, that you've been dealing with so much trauma and ongoing that it's lost and you just don't know how to get it back. So one of the techniques I developed incorporates aspects of all of these 4 pillars so that you can actually heal on every level. Because when I work with clients, I want the healing to be deep and lasting. And I want your spirit to be free to go with you on your spiritual and emotional growth journey, and you simply cannot do that if you're knee deep in trauma. You're buried in all this trauma. So I'm actually very excited about my newly minted Healing Mind, Body, Spirit course. So watch out, because I'll be sharing more about this with you very soon. Now, this is turning into a long one because we're talking about working with clients, and I love to work with people to help them to heal. It's just something that's in my DNA that I was called to do, and that's really the bottom line. I just want to help people to heal. There's too much trauma, pain, and suffering in the world. So my focus is, well, what can I do to be the person that can help my clients, people who work with me, to come out of that trauma and start living in a higher vibration, start living in a more loving space for themselves, which then, reverberates out there to other people and becomes more loving all around. Okay. But before I work with any client, I always have a chat with them on Zoom to clarify exactly what sort of trauma they've experienced and exactly how it's showing up in their lives now, and what issues it's causing for them, what's it stopping them from, from achieving. And I can usually help them to really understand the root cause, even in this first session, and give them some clarity on why it's manifesting the way it is. And then once I know that, and I know for sure that I can help them with the issues they've come to me with, then we discuss the best options for them to heal and how they can work with me. And then we start talking on what that would look like. Okay. But anyway, thank you for listening. I hope that explains a bit about who I am and what I do and why I do it. And stay tuned. I'll be back soon for more. Okay. That's it for now. Bye.